guys, welcome back to Feast or Famine with the Youngs.
We are the Youngs, and I'm wearing headphones, which means we trapped somebody inside of our computer again.
We have an absolute iconic guest today. We are very lucky to have Paige Griffith with us. Paige,
AKA
hi.
the legal Paige.
Hi, guys. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay!
We haven't seen you since, I think you guys talked about this while I was setting up.
Yeah.
Was it like just before COVID?
I think so. Yeah. And so
it was beginning of 2020.
Way too long. We just caught up for the past 10 to 15 minutes, and that was wonderful. So it's an honor to be here to talk with you guys on your own podcast. Congratulations. That's so exciting.
Right.
But yeah,
Thank you.
we have a long-standing kind of, virtual, somewhat in-person history together in the industry.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For those who don't know, I feel like Paige Griffith, aka the legal Paige, is kind of a household name in the wedding industry.
Basically.
I'm just I feel like we're so lucky to just know you personally and to have learned so much from you in the last several years of our business. For those who don't know you, just kind of tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I'm Paige. I live in Montana. It's the most obscure place for, I feel like, someone in the industry to live that runs a business that's kind of nationwide. But I'm from here, and that is kind of the start of my journey. So I was an experienced photographer for over a decade. And during that time, I was going to law school. I clerked for a federal judge, worked for some law firms. And then I decided, okay, let's meld my two passions into one. And the legal Page was created in 2018. Got it up and running, had some competition, but healthy competition in the industry. I just loved what I did so much, but I was able to kind of take it from a different angle, right? That's my unique USP was I'm a photographer. I've been in the weeds with you. I know the wedding industry backwards and forwards. And so we definitely targeted to wedding professionals and photographers as a whole. And then 2020 hit. So once 2020 hit, it was kind of right place, right time. My business was already up and running. And I really was able to be in a place where I could work 14, 16-hour days and help the wedding industry at such a pivotal time in our careers and journeys. And everyone was in the same boat, but nobody really knew what to do. So that's kind of where I would say the legal Page became more well-known. We were just a little fish in a big sea to begin with. And so, now it's really cool to say we're one of the leading legal education platforms online. We have 300 plus contract templates, short forms, clauses in our shop for a variety of industries now. So since 2020, we've definitely grown above and beyond just photography in the wedding industry. So small business owners as a whole and creatives as a whole. And then I have my own podcast, the Legal Page podcast, where we really just talk about legal stuff as entrepreneurs. So if you want a little bit of dose of that, you can go check that out. But we also have a blog that's really healthy. We put out blogs all the time, and a YouTube channel now as well. So really 3 ways to learn if you want more TLP.
Yeah.
Tell you what, COVID
awesome.
you were a godsend in COVID.
I was just about to say the same thing.
Because I think we talked probably, at least in the heart of everything, the March probably through June. I think we talk every other week just to pick your brain.
Yeah. And I just know that you were kind of all over the place, being a guest on so many different things and just sharing to make sure that you are protected and to make sure that clients are protected. And oh my gosh, I'm sure that you kind of lost your marbles a little bit with how busy you were.
I think back to that period of time, and it's insane to think what happened those 3 months. But again, it really was something I was very interested in, very passionate about, and had the knowledge and expertise that everyone else didn't. And so as a contract expert, and everyone was dealing with contract issues, and then being a wedding expert as well, again, I was just trying to help as many people as I could. And that's why I became a lawyer. So It was a crazy time, but we all got through it. We are over 3 years out, which is awesome now.
Yes.
And silver lining, like, I feel like the wedding industry as a whole, one, has a way better grasp on contracts, what to do with contracts. I think clients have a better understanding of contracts now. So I am always like, something really, good came out of this in terms of being a small business owner and a service provider, because we know what we need in there, or if there's a question, like how to address it, or who do we go to get the answer, that kind of thing.
I feel like there was like a huge mindset shift with contracts. Like, it's not just this thing that we signed to get something booked. It's like, it's protection on every single side and perspective for the client, for the vendor. Like, it's all about protection. And I feel like there was a very healthy mindset shift when it came to contracts because of COVID.
And I think that actually, like, we leaned into the idea of, especially during COVID, that the contract, yes, does protect us and our business, but it's also there to protect you, the person coming into business with us, because it spills out everything that you get, everything you should be getting. If something happens, here's what you do, here's what we do.
Right.
It's not just for us.
It definitely taught, I feel like it definitely taught like clients what to look for in contracts.
Yeah, and taught us a hard lesson as well. I think we all really hard lessons during those few months. Of, okay, we have a service contract and they have signed it, but I would say the majority of service providers in the wedding industry had clients that were able to get their way out of contracts, or, do different things with contracts because they weren't super sold and because the service providers didn't know what they know now. So beautiful kind of awakening and learning lesson for all parties involved. And I agree with you, Alex. I am a two-way street kind of person when it comes to contracts. It should be more heavily sided towards you as a business owner, because it's your contract that you're giving to people, and they should agree to your business practices and your policies under the agreement. But at the same time, you want clients to still have rights and responsibilities under the contract as well.
For sure.
But be able for them to understand like why certain provisions are there to protect your business, and that's what they're signing on to. So, I mean, this is a really good transition into what we're going to get into today. But yeah, it's insane to me 3.5 years later, one, how knowledgeable all of you are listening in terms of contracts. Like, we can now have a discussion where it's not so convoluted and confusing, and everyone kind of has a generalized, understanding of what's going on when it comes to why we need them as business owners.
Right. And it's a good segue, because we just had a session recently where a wedding or something, I don't know what it was, but a client used the term force majeure.
Oh, yeah.
And I think before COVID, I don't think anyone
even knew what that was.
Knew what that meant.
I know I did it.
And I think
was like,
you
what the heck
are
is
the
that?
person that brought that out.
Yeah.
And especially in our industry.
Yeah, I would say I am a force majeure expert now, more than I ever wanted to be. But I think it's one, really important provision. And two, honestly, the legal world only had what they had in case precedent for force majeure at the time. And so people also need to understand that the legal world was trying to run as fast as the world was going at that period of time.
Yeah.
And force majeure clauses, of course, weren't up to date, because nobody knew that a force majeure clause would be impacted by a massive pandemic. And we didn't have case law on it. So now we do, which is good. But that's not helpful for all of us at the time. And so I was helping everyone. Like you said, Veronica, I was definitely on tons of webinars and podcasts and experts and groups. And I was just trying to answer everybody's question as much as they could, because everyone talked about force majeure. But it was very... nobody had the same force majeure clause. Everything said a little bit, everything was worded a little bit differently in people's contracts, and the clients were taking it a different way as well. And so, now force majeure clauses, I would say, are pretty similar across the board, and they do very similar things. And most service providers know that it's really about the impossibility of performing. And so if we've got like voluntary cancellations or just, something going on with you as a service provider where you need to reschedule, like that is not force majeure, right? Like an injury, like somewhat foreseeable things are not. And yeah, I could talk about force majeure all day, but Alex, you're totally right. I mean, clients are still trying to invoke force majeure because it's like the easiest clause for them to think they can get out of a contract or somehow transition a contract into something else, whether that's like a rescheduling event or just an amendment or an addendum to a contract. But service providers, I believe, are a lot more experienced now when it comes to anything force majeure, act of God. We know it's like, well, this isn't the pandemic. So unless we have a hurricane or an avalanche.
Right. I was literally about to say a hurricane. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like the last 3 years, because of what we've learned from this, I've told you, I'm like, I feel like I missed a calling as a lawyer. Because I know way too much about contracts now.
You do. And Alex, I mean, it was so fun to talk to you. We conversed all the time back and forth. But it was nice to have your like healthy experience of what was actually going on with your clients and your contracts. And then also how people in the industry were asking you. And then we were all trying to give like very similar answers to people, which really helped, I think, the wedding industry come out on the other side the right way.
Yeah,
absolutely. And
for sure.
Finally there,
absolutely. Yeah, we're finally there. So something that we kind of wanted to talk about today are for those entrepreneurs who are getting started and just getting their feet wet with the business and legal side of things. I know when I started out, like I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I think I got my contract off of like...
I think the first couple, you didn't even have a contract.
I'm sure that I didn't.
That's pretty normal.
Which is
it's
like...
okay to say that out loud.
Yeah. It hurts a little bit.
Shame.
But yeah. But like, I didn't know what I was doing. I think I got it off like, just like something of like the internet, whatever. So what are
It wasn't very good. I will just say that.
Yeah. Like, what are some of the like biggest mistakes that you see made right off the bat when entrepreneurs or photographers are going to go get their contract and get it set up and ready?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with, I think, the first mistake or kind of look over that people do because they're so focused on kind of the shiny things when they're starting out their business, the marketing, the advertising, they're getting their website up, SEO, getting social media.
The contracts and stuff, that's icky.
They're like, I know I need one, so as long as I have one, it's good enough. Right.
Yeah.
And then you start running into situations where it doesn't hold up and it's actually not worth it to have done that from the beginning. But you won't know until you have that really hard lesson learned. And usually it's an expensive lesson. So I always tell people a contract is basically your first line of defense for anything. Some people oftentimes think it's your LLC or it's your insurance when it's actually not. It's your contract first. And your contract is going to say like, okay, this is what happens in this instance. And this is the business policy surrounding it. This is what the parties agreed to. And usually you come to some type of understanding pursuant to the language in the contract. And then of course, if there's issues, right, breaches of contracts, damages that are involved in the contractual agreement, then usually insurance kicks in. And so insurance would cover you for things like negligence, memory cards failing, things going wrong with the services that you're providing that are way beyond your control and beyond the contract, if the contract wasn't able to resolve the issue, right? And then above and beyond insurance is kind of your umbrella coverage of your LLC being in a bubble and separate from your personal assets. So that kind of, if you think about that trifold, protection layers that all really go on top of one another, the contract is your foundation. It's the one thing you actually really, really need to focus on in your business. And for newer photographers starting out, like maybe people have told you need to become an LLC. It's something you're like wanting to do, but not quite ready to do, that's okay. I tell people you can be a sole proprietor. It's fine. People are sole proprietors all the time. It's the default. Like you can be a sole proprietor until you feel like you have your feet under you and you have, you know, some risks and liabilities, of course, as an attorney and, you know, tax professionals. And you guys would probably say like an LLC is best. Yes, we're always going to say that. But I just know where people are at, and you don't have to do a lot of those other things if you just do that foundational aspect of your contract first. That's going to be the best, you know, $300 to $500 you've ever spent on your business. And it's going to serve you 100 fold. Like you can use that contract for hundreds and hundreds of clients. It's a one-time thing that you keep repurposing over and over again. And then you learn things through the way that you run your business that maybe are nuanced in your contract that you just need to tweak or change because it's a little bit different from maybe industry standard. And or you have clients that have questions that pop up throughout the year and maybe you need to reiterate something, address it in your contract or bring light to it. Maybe you need to have someone initial that clause because it's come up 5 times for some reason. Those type of things. So contractually, I would say really, really get a thorough contract, but understand that contract.
I was just about to say, I feel like some of the biggest things that are overlooked is when you're reading a clause and you don't know what it means. So like when a client asks you, what does this mean? You need to be able to explain it to them and educate them on what this contract or what this clause means. I mean, I'm guilty of it. Like in the beginning of my career, I didn't know what every clause meant. If I would have had a contract, I know that my contract did not have force majeure, but had it. I wouldn't have reading it. It's a language that I just do not understand.
Yeah. When we first put it in our contract, I think I read through it a dozen times, like, all right, let me get this straight. Yeah.
But then also like obviously having like resources like you and like hearing you speak about it obviously helped us understand it. But like aside from a force majeure clause, there are still some things that are kind of like hard to understand, I feel
Absolutely.
Like.
I mean, it's the whole reason that TOP honestly exists is I just feel like people didn't know what they didn't know. And like you said, and I agree with you, one of the biggest mistakes is people are just getting contracts from somewhere, whether that's online or maybe an educator is posting one that is their contract, but they're not an attorney, so they still don't really know what it means. Or they're getting it from a colleague that's like, hey, I'm so excited you're joining like our photography industry here in our region. Like, let me help you out to start. I understand that everyone like has the best of intentions doing that, but exactly what you just said, Veronica, you have no reason or no like skin in the game a little bit to learn about your contract when you're doing that. It's kind of an assumption that it's good to go until you have an issue, right? It's like a Band-Aid to fix the problem that you didn't have a contract to begin with. You have one, you're good to go. Let's just keep doing other things and we'll come back to it. When you buy a contract from someone like myself or other online virtual lawyers who are very, very experienced, the education that goes with it is what's actually going to help you far beyond just the language in the contract. So ours has tons of comments on the side of certain clauses like force majeure, you know, like a cancellation or a rescheduling clause, an indemnification clause, a severability clause, like clauses that are oftentimes a bit more confusing and do include more legal language than plain language, right? You're going to have, they have to for legal reasons. They should still be very clear and easy to understand, but maybe just that additional info saves you from being able to just communicate to your client, well, this is what this means. And people can always ask myself and my legal team in our Facebook group if they have a question about a clause. We have, like you said, tons of additional resources on it. If you're like not sure, we can give you tons of like swipe copy for you to explain things. And all your clients want is an answer. If you're a professional and you're like, I know my contract and this is why it says this, and this is, you know, if maybe it's like a model release, right? That comes up a lot for photographers. Lots of like privacy concerns have been popping up lately in the past couple of years.
Yes.
So maybe you need to switch the model release clause with a privacy of photographs clause if you're comfortable doing that. And that's an easy kind of negotiation to be had, but you need to know how to do that as someone and how to switch it out in your contract. So again, I think fully understanding what that document says, but having it super clear and still in plain language that your clients understand it too. Because if they don't understand it and they're signing something, it's really not a good contract.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the biggest things that like kind of propelled us as a business, because we were able to actually like, I feel like in our market, we kind of were one of the top runners during COVID that actually did really well, and were able to keep weddings and not necessarily
our
have to
contract
move
was
them,
just super
because
solid.
I feel like because of all these changes to our contract and realizing we need to fix it, I just made it a point to know how to explain it. And I would think through circumstances that might come up and figure out how I would explain what our contract says about it and how it would work. Like, what does it actually entail to reschedule, and how does that work? How does the money change? How does the money changing over to a new date work? And that's why I think I missed my calling, is because I was able to figure that out. I'm like, I know exactly what my contract says, and I feel confident in saying any situation we get into, I could probably talk ourselves out of it because of our contract.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like as a business owner, having a solid contract first and foremost, I just feel like a huge weight is like lifted. Like there's nothing that I am too overly concerned about happening that I don't feel like my contract wouldn't protect me. And as a business owner, like that's all you really need, is to know that you can be at peace because your contract can protect you amongst pretty much anything.
Yeah.
So let's dive into some more of these. So you've got your Facebook group. I imagine a lot of them already have your contracts, but because I'm in the group, I know that based on some of the questions, they don't. What are some of the biggest things that come up that you see in that group as far as what people deal with that would have been fixed with a better contract, or like what mistakes would their contract have had, I guess,
that could have been easily avoided?
Stopped that issue.
Okay, a few just off the top of my head that have been coming up quite a bit, I would say, over this year, 2023. Let's talk about like what's going on now. One of the biggies is not having the correct people signing a contract. So if you don't have one of our contracts and it's like a wedding photography contract, having both spouses sign is really important for joint and several liability. And then it's really important to move forward with that same type of signatories on the original agreement then would be on subsequent agreements. So if you have a cancellation agreement, everybody needs to sign that, including you. If you are doing some type of amendment, like maybe now an associate photographer is taking over that wedding because something happened in your personal life, so on and so forth. We have that pop up a lot. All parties involved need to agree to that. So that's one that continually comes up. Along those lines, what is becoming more and more popular is wedding planners in the industry having a lot of involvement in the contractual process. And so just if you're newer to the industry, just be aware that sometimes full service wedding planners want to be involved in the contractual process, but it's still very, very important that your spouses are the ones to sign the contract. And then they can deliver a copy of that to the wedding planner, because the full service wedding planner wants to know what's going on with all of the vendors. That makes sense, but they don't need to be the ones signing it. You're gonna have,
I've definitely seen that come up before.
You're gonna have a lot of issues
where the wedding vendor was signing.
If there's any change to the wedding, the wedding planner shouldn't be the one agreeing to all of that. They're putting a lot of risk and liability on their business versus if they're payment things, it depends on the situation, like who's paying who and what's coming through with payment. But just be careful of that. Alex, I mean, to be very honest with you, cancellation rescheduling posts, you're in my group, they pop up every single day.
Yep.
All the time. So I think people are still, clients are smart. And that goes back to like tying this whole conversation up with a bow. Like clients came out with a win too in 2020. Like they know how important the contract is now. And they have laser beam focus on their contracts, specifically large events like weddings, which are way more expensive now because of inflation in the world. So clients want to look at their contracts, and maybe they have wedding planners that are also helping them look at contracts. They're more likely to ask a legal friend to look at their contracts than they were 5 years ago. And that just means that clients are getting a little bit more just communicative surrounding cancellations and reschedulings, like and trying to see what mobility you may have there versus what's in your contract. And so just really understanding that, knowing your business policies, knowing your own morals and ethics too, on what certain situations you may be like allowing a little bit of leeway, but for all intensive purposes, everything really needs to be consistent across the board. And so knowing those clauses and, like you said, Alex, like how you do that process. And then the last thing that I would say is not pointing people to clauses in your contract in advance of them signing. So just sending the contract over to them and saying like sign on the bottom dotted line. And it doesn't help them. Everyone's signing contracts all day long online. Like we're updating policies and we're all accepting things 24/7. And so for people that, this is kind of the flip side of what I just talked about, for people that aren't laser beam focused on the contract and just want to get it done and move forward and book you as a vendor and, you know, continue on with their planning process, or their session process, right? If it's just a photography session, they might not look as closely at it. So you still have to do your due diligence of pointing people to, Alex, like you said, like if this were to happen, this is what this clause would do in this situation. I'll make sure I give you guys, for all of the listeners here, we have swipe copy that you can copy and paste to send, like the contract sending email template is what we like to call it. So instead of being like, here's your contract, sign on the bottom dotted line, here's the button to get to it, you're going to explain in your own words. Like they've already had an inquiry call with you. They like you. They want to book with you.
They're ready for
They're ready for it, but get them ultra ready for it. Tell them like what they can expect when they open this document. And you pointing to certain provisions, like we say around 3 to 5 is good. The most important ones that you know are going to pop up time and time again. You doing that gives you double protection. Not only did they sign the contract, but you can point back to you sending that email that they knew that was your policy surrounding X type of cancellation or X type of rescheduling, or there's a fee involved. In them not trying to get around that when the time actually comes. So those are just some big ones off the top of my head that pop up quite a bit time and time again.
And by doing that, like pointing out certain clauses in the contract, like preemptively before they even ask questions, I feel like also can instill a certain amount of trust
100%.
From the client to you. Like, oh, I'm hiring a vendor who knows what they're talking about and is already like fixing the concerns that I may have had. And now I don't because they already addressed it. They already addressed it. So I feel like that's really good. Just communication, like right off the bat.
And if your consult call goes well enough that you kind of get an idea of what they might
be
question,
concerned about,
you can preemptively talk about that in that email so that you're like, I know this person's going to want to know about the reschedule clause because of ABC during the call. So I'm going to just go ahead and mention that. Yeah.
I do want to go back to something that you were talking about, as far as having both clients sign the wedding contract. I know, like, for a while, I only had one signature on my contract. But I would love for you to share, what are some of the possible risks not having both parties sign?
Okay, so one of them is any type of like partial refund situation. Sometimes the other party can get involved in that. And I've seen it so many times in terms of like you may not know where that credit card payment came from, but then they didn't sign the contract and now they want their money back and like something happened, right? Okay, you all kind of know what I'm talking about.
So
here.
like,
yeah.
So like a bride would sign, but the groom didn't, but the groom paid and he wants his money back.
And
like
then you're dealing with kind of a third party to a contract, but they did pay and maybe they can produce evidence to that effect. It just gets so messy.
Yeah.
Another one is a model release. Like lots of people don't know about this. I don't know why. I mean, it happens with family sessions too. I'm actually doing like a whole series on this for photographers on implied consent. But if you're above 18, like you have to sign on behalf of yourself to be in photos and have a model release. And so if it's one spouse signing a contract, the other spouse isn't like saying yes to all of it. They are probably giving you implied consent to do so. And so that's what
like for like an example of implied consent would be like the wedding party. Like they're implying that they're going to be having their photo taken.
Correct. But like literally a question we got in our inbox today was something about more public figures at their event, celebrities at their event. They were fine with using photos of them in the model release. So the person needed to tweak their model release. And they were wondering like how that impacts the copyright clause and the reproduction clause. And it really doesn't. We're just talking about a model release here. But if you're only getting it from one of the spouses, and for the most part, I would say photographers they're pretty careful about really only showing like the name, the likeness, the personality, the face of those two people that signed the contract, and not like everybody else could be in the background or like tertiary in the photo, that kind of thing. You're not going to have lots of issues pop up with wedding parties and families. I mean, sometimes you do, and then you just have to take down the photo because you know you didn't get a model release from them. And it's not like they have a big sign that when people come to the wedding that are like, you agreed to photography here. Like it's just reality. Like that's not happening. But it is called implied consent. And so just be careful of that when you don't have both people sign and you really want to use these photos for marketing and advertising.
Yeah, that's good.
On the implied consent thing, we do this all the time. And I don't know if a lot of people do this. They should. That only works for adults.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say.
And kids are always getting down on the dance floor, and it's always adorable, and we always capture it for the couple.
Yeah.
But you cannot post that unless that parent gives you consent.
Be super careful about that.
We get that question. I would say maybe honestly, like 2 out of every 5 weddings that we have, we'll get an email or they'll mention it on some type of meeting like, hey,
or during the day of.
Yeah, my niece is the flower girl, but like please don't like share her photo online. And I'm like, oh, like
or whatever.
Like
we typically don't anyway, but like if there's like an instance where a little kid was doing a Michael Jackson dance and it was killing it, so we asked the parent specifically, if we decide to post this, can we? And if we do, we'll send you something.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, that's fine, no big deal.
That's so smart. But most people don't know to do that. They're just like, I'm just gonna post this because it's like a private / large event. And so people have implied consent, which they do. Like it is a legal thing to have implied consent, but that is a revocable thing. And it's a very quick revocable thing. When someone asks, you got to take it down.
Does it change when it comes to minors? Like, is it more of like, is it like illegal for like us to like share photos of a kid like on a dance floor without the parental consent?
For the most part, yes.
That's what I thought. That's why we do that. But I mean, we err on the side of caution.
It's hard to deal with those exceptions.
Yeah. And why would you argue it anyway? Like,
yeah,
like that's not your kid. So
we just avoid it if we can.
Yeah, we err on the side of caution with that.
I think of all of the instances that we have asked, we never actually ended up using it anyway.
Yeah. So that's always one that I see happen on our side of things quite often.
Yeah, and same thing goes for family photographers. So for any of you listening, this is honestly more of an issue for family photographers because you're usually just having one person sign. It's hard to get both people to sign. Like it's just one of the parents that's more involved in the booking process with you and working and communication process with you. So just be very careful of that there's a whole bunch of implied consent there on the other parent's behalf, especially if they're in the photos. But they can revoke model releases for themselves, for their own children, if things were, to go south. We've seen that quite a bit in the past few years. Again, clients are just like, they know what rights they have, and you need to respect those, and you need to understand how that goes. So like big family photography events, if you have multiple families in photos, try to get model releases from everybody. That's like a one pager you can just like bring and have them sign or put it on your iPad, that kind of thing. But just be careful of who's signing on behalf of who. If there's minors in the photos, do they have a legal parent or guardian signing? Is that very clear in the model release that it includes minors, like in a family photography contract? Or if like Alex, I love what you said about the inquiry call, because one, that's genius. I don't know why I've never said this before. I learned something on every podcast. But now I'm going to take that and run with it. I'll always give you credit. It's so smart because one, you're having a touch point to something that meant a lot to them that they told you about in the inquiry call on the email that now is like solidifying your guys' relationship. It's just, that's money. That's butter. I love it.
It's anticipating a pain point and
taking it away from them. Like have the plan in place before something were to occur that would invoke the plan. But for like, if you're having an inquiry for a family photo session or even a wedding, like if they're talking about their children, maybe that they have that are going to be in the wedding, or stepchildren that are going to be in the wedding or something along those lines, anticipate that, because you may want those photos. And so maybe you need to include children in your model release clause. That's just the children of the people signing, or kind of have that conversation with them before the contract comes up, or know that it may come up once you take the photos and you're like, that's the money photo that I really want to use, but I need to ask them because I didn't in the contract. I'll stop there.
Yeah, for sure.
So tracking back to having the certain people sign and having both parties sign the contract. I know this comes up all the time, not only in your group, but in literally every wedding photo, video group ever created. When the parents are paying, and we started doing this because of your addendum. Everybody's like, who signs if mom's paying and mom wants to be part of the contract and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, so it should be a gift. And no, you taught us this, that they get their own.
The third-party payer contract.
Third-party payer contract.
Yep.
Explain why that is so important.
Yeah, it's all about control over you as the service provider and who your client actually is. 1, before, 2, during, and 3, after, because there's issues that can occur at all stages of your working relationship with them. So if someone, usually what happens is the parent is involved somehow, or the third party. We call it a third party payer addendum because sometimes somebody could gift the funds to the person.
And we actually had one that we split because they were splitting payment. So both people that paid signed up.
Yeah, so smart. So smart. Sometimes if it's so... I'm such a lawyer. I'm always like, it depends, because it does. And you guys kind of know this too. Like, if it's someone that's so like, massive arm's length away from the couple themselves, it's probably best to just have them like gift the money and then the couple pays. But because you haven't talked to them, they're not involved, like you really need to know that as a photographer in particular, because of the issues that come with day of and post-production, like how involved this person is. If it's a parent, hands down, get a third-party payer addendum, because you just never know how involved they're actually going to get, even if they say they're not going to be involved. And once you know that someone else is paying, that kind of just triggers an immediate third-party payer addendum. There are lots of times, for anyone listening, for all intensive purposes, there's a lot of times you have no idea. Someone has given money and they're, the couple's paying with their credit card. Who knows where that money came from? There's nothing you can do about that. But when you know prior to the contract being signed originally, your clients need to sign your service contract, which is your photography agreement, and then you sign. And the third party and the clients sign the addendum, which the addendum would reference the original contract. So the couple is still involved. If payment doesn't go through from this third party, the couple still has to be on the hook for payment. You can't just give that all to the third party, because there's issues there too. Like, what? the clients are not, they don't have any like quid pro quo here.
Responsibility
if something goes wrong. So that third party payer addendum is signed by 3 people other than you, and then yourself. So once the clients would sign your contract and the third party payer addendum and the third party would sign, then I would say then you can sign both. Like, you're good to go with payment and contractual obligations. So rights, responsibilities, model release, right? Like, the third party doesn't need to sign that. And you can't have a third party sign a contract, because then you're getting a model release from no one. There's so many things in the original contract. That's where like wedding planners and parents, like, I know they just want to take that burden off of people and sign things, but it's legally, they can't sign on to things that are in your contract. The clients need to. And you really, at the end of the day, want to really just be focusing on who is your actual client. They can send the photos to whom they want. They have the ability to do that in terms of, like personal use, sending the photos to their family and friends. And the other person is just a payer. And that's all they are. And so the addendum really says, like, you don't have any rights here to 1, tell me how to edit, to 2, tell me what to do day of. Like, that is why I am working with the clients on this. So that is why you use such a contract. We have lots of good blogs on this, lots of good resources in addition to what I just said. So if you need a little bit more, or you're dealing with a situation like that, as Alex said, people post it in our group and it comes up in other groups all the time. And I'm happy to like answer based on your specific situation, because it could be a little bit different than how like your photographer friend did it with their client.
So when a photographer is having that like initial conversation with the client that's going to book them, do you always advise asking where funds are coming from, or do you wait for that to kind of come up so if you need to send a third party like contract?
I am not one to push this. So as an attorney and a lawyer, like telling you what to do, I don't know. I would say if it comes up organically, then you need to send one, like I said. If not, then you're putting that risk and liability on your clients, and you're not aware of any of those circumstances. So it's actually less liability for you in that situation.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's really easy for you to like, if a third party comes up later down the road and they try to get involved with your dealings, you're like, sorry.
Like, who's this?
The reason that's the reason why I asked is like, if there's a photographer listening and they're like, oh wait, maybe a mom paid for that and they didn't sign a contract, am I going to get in trouble? I think the answer is no.
Absolutely
right?
not.
Like,
you usually
you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know. But if you do know and you haven't done anything, sometimes you're also implicitly allowing them to be a part of this agreement orally, and you don't want to get into that situation.
Right. Yeah. And I was going to say, that's kind of like how we do it is I will only send the third party payer when that is brought up to me organically, like, hey, this person's paying, and I'm like, oh, thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Or sometimes so
then our process changes, and I'll explain to them, hey, there's going to be an additional contract, and I explain everything on how it goes, and But
like if we have a call that mom wanted to be part of, that usually implies that mom is involved enough that she's probably going to pay.
Yeah.
Then we'll subtly bring it up in a sense of like, we'll send you the contract. If mom is going to pay, or if somebody that's not you are
Very
going to
like
pay,
nonchalant.
we'll have a third-party payer contract. It's just no big deal, and just kind of gloss over it really fast so that it's said, but they expect it in case it is the case.
There's just so many situations that could vary here. And I don't know really if it would behoove you to always ask that question. I think that's a little sticky, and it's like getting a little bit too much into their personal finances as a photographer.
Yeah, for sure.
I think like wedding planners, maybe like they would, if I don't know, if I was like a wedding planner coach, maybe you're like listening and you're like, oh my God, no, I don't want my wedding planners to like not ask that question. So don't hold us to this, but that is why I would suggest just kind of, again, knowing and understanding things actually puts you on the hook legally for certain situations. So just be aware of that. So unknown things that are occurring literally happen all the time as photographers. You have no idea where that payment came from or how that money landed in their bank account. And it's none of your business unless they tell you, unless the parents are like, I need my miles on this credit card and I'm going to be involved. And then you're like, okay, you've told me, now we need to move forward with how that's going to work.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, I could sit here and talk contracts literally all day. So maybe we'll have to bring you back on for another topic if something comes up.
Yeah. I would love to know, just like off the top of your head, like what are some of the like biggest pieces of advice that you have for photographers, videographers out there getting started and getting started with their contracts? Like any advice
anything
that you
hasn't been said already.
Yeah, I think one of them is, don't feel like you need your clients to initial every page, every clause. Legally, they're bound to the terms of the contract. The only caveat to that is if you have a really important clause that you really want people to pay attention to, maybe have them initial that clause. Like a model release clause. If you're a family photographer, probably good to point them in that direction.
I was going to say, we do that with, sorry to cut you off, but we do that with our meal.
Yeah. Meals and break.
Oh, like, the hot meal.
I like highlight it in the contract. There are several parts that I like have specifically color coordinated, like highlighted to bring the attention to it. And that is one of them. And
that they initial.
And it was one of those circumstances, like, you know, they didn't know because they were just like, they just signed the contract. They didn't really care too much. So it was overlooked, and we didn't end up with a hot meal. We ended up with a cold turkey sandwich, and I don't like turkey subs. So I want a hot meal. And so I have them initial and I have it highlighted so they all know that we get a hot meal. But yeah, it's just like more protection.
Yeah, meals, breaks too. Like some people think you take a bathroom break, that then you have to add that onto your coverage, like just things along those lines. And then kind of the perfect tail off of what you just said, the second thing I was going to say is just organization of your contract. Having people being able to easily go to a section of your contract that is about delivery of online gallery. Like, what can I expect here?
Yeah.
Reproduction. Like, can I give this to other people? Archiving. How long do I have my online gallery for? And if it's taken down, do I have to pay to have you put it back up? Because it's time and energy and all of that for you as the photographer. So just things along those lines. Okay. So just think about the contract as a whole. How is it being read and understood to your clients? Making sure it's organized. And then the last thing about organization that I'll say is most important clauses at the top, kind of more general provisions at the bottom, and like general business practices in the middle. So, you know, fee clause, retainer clause, cancellation, rescheduling, model release, copyright information, that needs to be at the top, because your clients are going to look at that part of the contract first and in more depth. We all do it. It is human nature. We're looking at a contract. We're kind of seeing how it reads at the beginning. We're making sure we understand it.
And then they
you
lose
start
attention
scrolling really fast and go to the bottom. So just remember that moving on from this podcast. If you learn anything, that is a good thing to take away.
It's like the litigation clause is always like last.
Real quick, I just thought about this, and because we will forever get this question as a photographer. I don't know if you can kind of help put this into like a better, easier way to understand. Can you explain, obviously like we know the difference, but for other people listening, can you explain the difference between copyright and owning rights to the images, and like having a print release?
What you're asking is print release versus owning the rights.
Yes, thank you.
Because copyright and owning the rights are the same thing.
Copyright and then print release, because when we have to, like, we know how to explain it to our clients, but from a legal standpoint, I would love to hear like you explain that maybe in a better way that what we could.
That's a very common thing.
Yeah. So as a photographer, even without a copyright clause, you own the rights to the photos that you create the minute that you put them in a tangible medium. So when you click the shutter on your camera, you compose the shot, they go onto a memory card, you own that image as a photographer. Then your contract would state that you own the copyright images to those final edits and, you know, JPEGs that you're giving to your clients in an online format. What you are giving to your clients is not a copyright or a transfer of copyright ownership. You want to keep that at all costs. The only difference is like branding photography, or if you're giving it to a business. We could go into that in another episode, but right now we've mainly just been talking about like personal use. We're just working with clients for, you know, sessions and weddings. What you are conveying to them is a personal license to use the photos. And that's what you need to have in your reproduction clause. It explains how the personal license to use works, what they can do with it, what they can't do with it, who they can share their images with, who they can't sell, they can't gain any commercial value from the photos without your consent. That is going to save you tenfold if you have that type of language in your contract. It's in all TLP contracts because you're right, Veronica, it is the most important thing to us as photographers.
Yeah.
We need to continually own the rights to our photos. And it just needs to be clearly spelled out to clients on what they can and cannot do. So don't do anything with your copyright. The copyright needs to be all under you and your business name. And a personal license to use is what you're giving with just a regular client relationship, client to business relationship. If it's a business to business relationship, then it may change a little bit. And it's very different depending on how you want to go about it.
Yeah.
It's usually more expensive.
Usually more expensive. And that's called a commercial license to use. So be very careful to not use the word like commercial license or anything like that in a
or advertising
or allowing it to go to any other third party without your consent. Additional use means additional fees.
Right, for sure. We've gotten the question of like, can we purchase the copyright? I'm like, well, I mean, you could, but it would be very expensive.
Yeah, and people do. Like, people do purchase copyrights.
For sure.
I mean, you're basically giving up everything if you want to do that. And in some cases, it may make sense for all parties involved.
Yeah.
But that's like a 1-2% chance that would occur.
Yeah.
Of all weddings ever. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to clear that up because I feel like they're, especially from like the client side, that those two things kind of get mixed up and they don't fully understand what that means. Yeah,
you're totally right. So if someone's like, can I buy the copyright? Pause, take a second. They probably don't know what they're talking about.
They probably just want to be able to print it.
They probably are like, how does this personal license to use work? Like, can I put it on a big canvas in, my office at my workplace? Like, they don't know how to explain that to you. Yeah,
exactly. For sure. Awesome. Well, Paige, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to chat with us. We super appreciate it.
We're not done. We need to know where people can find you.
The Legal, Paige. It's play on words of my first name, but thelegalpage.com, easiest place to find me. And then on basically every other social media platform and YouTube channel, just type in The Legal Page. I promise you'll find us.
Yeah, we'll post all the links.
Be posted in the description. We will put our affiliate link in there, so please buy all of her contracts. Every purchase supports us, and in attachment, this podcast.
Yeah, but seriously, like, Paige has every single type of, I feel like, contract that you could ever need, or clause, or like any wedding industry pro, I feel like could be very well taken care of just by coming to you and using your contracts. So
oh yeah, everything. Second shooters, styled shoots.
We also make more template contracts all the time. So just know we're on the up and up. We're always doing more things. So if you have an inquiry that you can't, find a product for on our site, tell us about it and maybe we'll make the template and put it up. Because there's probably more people that need it. And then all of our template contracts come with future updates too. So one thing we didn't kind of talk about on the podcast as well is knowing that your contract is a living document and it's going to change and ebb and flow, and things are going to change with your business and with the world. So of course, also with the law and the laws that pertain to, general contract provisions across the US. So myself and my legal team are always updating contracts, and you get complimentary updates to our contracts, and we send you notifications. We'll let you know what those are. So that's all part of getting a legal document from TLP as well. It's one of my, biggest kind of reasons behind creating this type of contract template shop is I want to make sure people are not only covered now, but they're covered in 2 years, they're covered in 5 years. And it's not something, I'm not like a software program that you need to like pay $199 to get the update. So just know that going into it.
That's
legal pay
it's always appreciated. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all we have for this episode. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Paige, again. It was so great to chat with you and to catch up. If you guys have any other questions or comments, if you're watching from YouTube, definitely put them down below.
And I'll also link the Facebook page for the legal page so that you can ask questions there too. And she sometimes chimes in, and there's a lot of other people that do chime in that are also super knowledgeable.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, guys. We will catch you on the next one. Peace.